Hey there guys, Reaper here, hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I am back with another painting video. This time around we are doing Megan from Zombicide Green Horde core set. Somehow I managed to miss her when I was doing the other core heroes. She'd fallen into my Reaper Bones box and I managed to pull her out after I found her earlier. So we're getting on with her now to get it finished. As you can see, she was primed in our old grey primer before I had to get the dark one. So she's a nice light grey prime. Not that prime colour really matters that much. It just makes things easier when you're painting lighter colours, such as barbarian flesh that we're using now for all of these skin areas. Now that all the skin is finished, we're moving on to Crusted Sore, and this is for her dress. In the artwork, it's sort of a purplish maroony colour, so Crusted Sore is the closest I've got as a base colour. And then I'm going to use the purple wash just to purple it up a little bit more towards the end. And that would be it for Crusted Sore. I am now moving on to Warlock Purple for her blouse. And as you can see, this is a very pink colour, which obviously in the artwork, not so pink. But for the same principle as the Crusted Sore, I'm going to use the purple wash afterwards to purple it up and make it look that more violet style of colour that she's got. Now with the blouse all done, we're moving on to Bone White, and this is for the bandages she has on her arm and leg, along with the fur that's around the sleeve of her dress. Next up is Matte Black, and this is for most of what is left of the mini, apart from the sword, and there's a few bits on her belt that I don't do in this black. Normally I wouldn't use black, as well you can't shade down from black as it's the darkest you could get, but I'm planning on highlighting back up with a grey, which adds enough depth that it just works really. Now that black is all finished, I'm moving on to dirt splatter, and this is pretty much for what's left of the belt along with the scroll case he has on her back. Now that the brown's all finished, I'm moving on to the metallics, which is gunmetal, and this is for the sword and the potion bottles in her pouch, as you can't paint glass, so silver's the closest thing you can really get to painting that. Next up with the metallics is Vallejo's Tinny Tin, and this is for the ends of these sword sheaths and the bars on one of the scroll cases. And now the final colour before we start the first layer of highlighting is Vallejo's Leather Brown, and this is for all the wrappings on her staff along with some of the stitching she's got on her clothing. It's just to make it sort of pop out that little bit more, just to give it that edge and make it, yeah, it's there sort of thing. Now that that's finished, I move on to Dungeon Grey for the highlights of the black areas. And as you can see, it's more over the top than it normally would be, and this is just to make it pop that little bit more after the wash has gone on, as the wash will darken it back down to more of a very dark grey, almost black, but it gives it that blend if you have a bit of a larger area to work with. Once Dungeon Grey is done, I move on to Pure Red, and this is for the first potion bottle, along with the exposed part of her sword hilt, as she has sort of a leather wrap on there that is red in the concept art. Next up is Vallejo's Jade Green for the middle potion, along with a green crystal she has hanging from her belt. And for the final potion, I use Magic Blue by Vallejo, just to dot in that last little bit, and then that is the potions finished. Now that the base layers and the highlight of the black are finished, I move on to the washes, starting with Flesh Wash for all of her skin. Once the flesh is done, I move on to Purple Tone, and this is for all of her clothing, just to give it that purple tint that you need to sort of change those colours down to where they should be. And then finally we come in with dark tone, and this is for everything left of the mini. Now that the washes have dried, I move on to Bone White by Vallejo. This is just to bring up those bandages and the furs around her sleeve. I do also do the whites of her eyes in this colour. Next up is Leather Brown by Vallejo, and this is just to touch up those areas that we'd already done in Leather Brown, but the wash has darkened a little bit more than I would like, so I'm just giving them a quick once over just to bring them back up to where they should be. Now I move on to Gunmetal, and this is just to bring that shine back to the sword. Just the top sort of 2/3, just to make it a bit more shiny and still have a gradient of that oily look that the dark tone gives you. Once the sword is shiny again, I move on to Barbarian Flesh, just to highlight the raised areas of the skin and any area that's sort of facing upwards. So I don't do some of the sort of under the leg or sort of underarm, just the areas that the sunlight would be hitting if the sun was above. With the flesh finished up, I grab Crusted Saw to do the inside of her mouth. I do lose some footage though after this of using Bone White to do the teeth. I would recommend doing that, even though it's a little bit fiddly, just because it looks weird if you don't. And finally, we finish up with Matte Black for the pupils of her eyes, and as always, the matte black base. There we go, that would be Megan complete now. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed, guys, but most importantly, with everything going on in the world, don't forget to be kind to each other.